Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Accessible Technology for All, conversation with Ted Drake and Sarah Margolis Greenbaum. And that's everyone. Great. So before we launch into things, just a few housekeeping items. We have two ASL interpreters joining us today, Sean Merriman Roberts and Kevin Mogg. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. They will be trading off with the interpretation duties. Also, if you are interested in live captioning, you can click custom live streaming service in the top left-hand corner of the window here. It'll pop out a separate window for you and you can use that. So I think we jump right into things. I think we'll do a brief round of introductions from everyone. A little bit about you, your name, where you come from, what you do. And how about you, Ted? How about we start with you?
Sorry, it's always that uncomfortable try to unmute Zoom moment. My name is Ted Drake, and I'm the Global Accessibility Leader for Intuit. I've been at Intuit for 9 years. Before that, I was at Yahoo, and I co-founded the Yahoo Accessibility Lab. I also worked on products like Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Tech, and I was a developer evangelist. And I got into accessibility because I was the website manager for the Museum of Art in San Diego. And being a museum, you have to be accessible. So that's where I first learned about this. That was about 20 years ago.
Great, thank you, Ted. And next we have Sarah Margolis Greenbaum. She is a project manager for Intuit. Sarah? Oh, I think you're muted, Sean.
I'm Sarah, and I'm work with Intuit for almost 3 years now. I started on the accessibility team with client connections with the team. And so I've been working as accessibility.
Great. Next we have Alexander Singh. He is an information referral specialist here with the CIL.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm an information referral specialist here at the CIO. I am joining the webinar because I'm very much of a technology enthusiast. I like technology and I use assistive technology as well as different devices to make it more accessible for me to do things.
Great, thank you, Alex. And lastly, we have Joshua Avino. He is the assistive technology specialist with the CIL. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you. And yeah, like Kellen said, I'm the assistive technology specialist. I help people figure out which devices are best for them, how to obtain it, and also being legally blind and assistive technology user myself, it's great to be able to meet with Ted and Sarah to hear their insights.
Great, thank you, Joshua. So I thought we'd start with you, Ted. Give us sort of an overview of your history with accessible technology. Where was it when you first got into the industry, and how far do you think it's come today?
I would say that when I first joined, I guess you could say the disability community as an engineer, it was in bad shape. We were doing websites, and we were most interested in making websites visually attractive. And in order to do that, this was back when we were dealing with Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer like 3. We did a lot of really, really bad stuff. So it was a matter at one point of saying, let's throw away all the bad stuff and let's start over again. And that's where I got in on development, was the process of throwing out the bad and starting over again with the good. And we call that standards-based web development, which meant basically looking at the HTML specification and using semantic markup, separating the design from the structure and the behavior. And that's what started bringing accessibility back into web development. It was from being involved in standards-based web development that I ended up getting a call from Yahoo, and they asked me to come up and join them as a web developer. And what we realized at that point was that it's like a roller coaster. It's constantly a roller coaster. It was horrible. It got good. And then we discovered Web 2.0, where we weren't building web pages. We were building pseudo applications. And then everything went down. And then we had to figure out, how are we going to fix this garbage? And that's when ARIA came out. And ARIA was a way that we could have dynamic sites, but we could also make them accessible. So then the accessibility went back up. And then people started saying, hey, let's create a new JavaScript platform every 2 months. And so everything went back down again. And so at this point, I would say that we're in pretty good shape. We've got React seems to be the main platform for JavaScript. Ember is good. We've got pretty good foundations, and the browsers are good. So at this point, our job is to make sure that developers do things the way they're meant to be done, and just not breaking accessibility. But at the same time, it's not just web browsers. We're also seeing this tremendous improvement of technology in general. It used to be that in order to make something work took a lot of effort, and it usually meant you had to hand build something. But today, you can go and you can get something like iOS or Android, which is a really powerful, well-developed platform. And you can build something on those platforms overnight, and they're accessible to begin with. So we have a lot of tools today. We have cloud computing, we have AI built into our devices, we have super powerful cameras, sensitive three-dimensional audio. We have sensors on our watches and in our phones that give us a lot of health data. So I think at this point, we're in a good shape where we have the raw materials to build good, personalized, accessible experiences.
So it sounds like things have come a long way, but what would you say are some of the gaps that are currently hot issues, you think, in accessible tech?
The biggest gap, and this really became apparent during COVID-19, is the digital divide. Most of the developers are in California, and where we have great Wi-Fi, we have great access to 1, 2, 3, 4 different devices. We have Macs, we have iPhones and all this stuff. But that doesn't help anybody that is not in California, that doesn't have the same access. And we saw this really happen in India. We at Intuit, we've been working with the nonprofit in India, and they are a school that bring in students from around the country, and they teach them independent living skills. They teach them computer science. They teach them how to use Windows machines and write Office equipment, like work in Word and all that stuff. Not only that, but they also get their high school or their GED, their beginning college, that kind of training. But then overnight, they had to shut down their schools, and people had to go back to their villages. So someone was learning independent living, but then all of a sudden they have no phone. If they have a phone, they no longer have high band access. If they do have high band access, they're paying a data rate. So all of a sudden they've gone from an ideal environment where they have teachers in the room, they have technology, they have access to nothing. I wouldn't say nothing, but lack of technology. So they reached out to us, and we've been working on some projects to buy mobile phones and send them to the organizations that they can then set them up and send them to the people that are working in that are living in the villages that are not able to attend schools. That was just like a really concrete example of how we can focus on the really great, but if you're only focusing on the really great, you're missing a lot of people that are not able to access those.
It seems like the whole COVID crisis is the intersection with accessibility has been really, really interesting. And there's been a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. I'd like to kick it over to Alex and Joshua. As people with disabilities, in what ways do you think this accessible tech has made your work easier under COVID? And what are some ways it's kind of in a struggle?
I'll let you go first, Joshua.
Okay. Is the so for accessibility in terms of the positives and negatives with COVID-19, I think definitely there's like a good a lot more information has we've been able to, at least for me being legally blind, using a screen reader, the access to information has increased. Definitely the where we are now, as Ted said, you know, there's a lot of great things going on. You know, there's we have access to all this different information that we may not have had before. Some drawbacks I could see is there just being a bit of a step behind in, you know, the full accessibility of things, and which is still great improvements from where how things were, but yeah, still you know, improvements moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
I think also, I do agree that there are some positive and negative. The positive is definitely that things are more accessible and that it's more widely available, like you were saying, Ted, with the apps and different things. The downside or the negative side of it is not everyone is able to get the devices who is able to get the apps. So some people may not be able to have the iPad or the smartphone or tablet or even computers. And I like what you're doing, Ted, in terms of giving out those devices to people, because that definitely opens up the communication for people who use these devices and be able to get on the webinars and other type of communication apps or other apps that are out there.
Sarah, I'd love to loop you into this. What's worked for you under COVID, working from home, and what hasn't?
Well, I think it's been more positives than negatives for me. I noticed that I use Zoom a lot. That's been a big change for me for work. Previously, you know, most people didn't use Zoom. And so there were a lot of meetings that had to be in person, and I had to use VRS, Video Relay Service, to join on a conference call. And people would talk in an office, they would talk over each other. And I would really struggle to know who was talking in that meeting. And if you weren't there in person, because the interpreter wouldn't be there in person. So that was an issue. So now with Zoom, it's much better, actually. You know, it's there's not that overlapping talk problems. People tend to take turns much better. So that actually has been an improvement for me.
That's fantastic.
Let me add one thing to that. Sarah, she's been working remotely for years. And so within our team, we've been able to create communication methods. But when COVID happened and everybody went home and Intuit switched to Zoom, the transcription service was locked down from a security standpoint. They didn't want people printing up transcripts and, you know, sharing them. So we reached out to the team that managed Zoom, and we told them we need transcripts to be turned on for Sarah because she's attending these meetings. She needs to see them. So they quickly turned them on. It was within a week they had the policy changed, but what that's done is it's really changed the whole use of Zoom at Intuit. You're now able to download the video and get the transcripts. You can upload them to Google Drive, which we use, and then turn those into closed captioning. And now you have Otter.io doing live transcripts, which really, while we initially reached out to the team because Sarah had a distinct need, we also knew that this was going to impact the entire company. And once they turned it on, it's been a very popular part of using Zoom.
Great. So, Ted, I have another question for you. We've talked about some of the gaps, a little bit of tracking the history of accessible tech through time. What are some of the future hopes? What's the next cutting edge sort of tech out there that can make people's lives a lot easier?
My hope is that answer is going to come from someone that has a disability, that has a problem that they want to solve once and for all. And so they happen to have a device like a watch or a phone or something where they can actually create an app that solves that problem. And by solving that problem for themselves, they're able to actually solve the problem for a lot of people. And that's the benefit of where we are today, is that it doesn't take a lot of resources or training. Anybody can build an Android app or an iOS app. And I think we saw that when the iPad came out. When the iPad came out, you had these big assisted audio communication devices. They were big, they were expensive, they were difficult to fix, but they were very purpose-built and they worked really well. When the iPad came out, Proloquo Go created an app. And that app was basically an AAC device turned into an iPad. There's a person up in Canada, Glinda Watson Hyatt. She wrote an article about how she went to the App Store, bought an iPad, and then immediately was able to order at Starbucks. But what's cool is it wasn't just Proloquo Go. AAC apps proliferated across iOS because parents found that Proloquo Go didn't answer the problem they needed for their child. And other people were engineers and they needed a different solution. So what's really cool is I think people are going to be able to personalize, create products, create solutions based on their own personal needs, and then that will solve other people's needs.
Really very interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and Joshua, feel free to hop in on this. Ted, could you talk a little bit about OrCam and its possibilities for people that are low vision? I'm very interested in that, how that could help someone like Joshua.
So OrCam is a really cool product, and it basically is like a camera that attaches to your glasses. And let's say I'm in a building and I want to see, let's say I'm at a trade show. This is a great example. I'm at a trade show and I'm walking through all the tables and I want to see what they have. I can hold up my finger at a sign and then OrCam will read whatever I'm pointing out with my finger. So it's a visual identification device that sits on your glasses. It has a headphone so you can hear what it's saying. OrCam was built from the ground up. It's a fantastic product. It's very purpose-built. It's very powerful, but it also took a lot of time and a lot of resources to build it. On the other end, you have a new startup called Envision AI. And what they've been able to do is take off-the-shelf components, Android operating system, Google Glasses, AWS, cloud storage, so perhaps they're using Salesforce for customer connection, things like that. But what they're doing is instead of building everything from the ground up, they're able to take bits and pieces and then create a similar product like OrCam, but they're able to go deeper into the artificial intelligence, create faster, more functions. And I think that's what we're going to see is the ability to go faster and deeper by not having to build everything from scratch. But I still say that OrCam is a great product. So I'm not saying that they're inferior to Envision AI.
And I just want to add to that. Yeah, the great thing that's interesting that you when we talk about OrCam or Envision AI, these wearable types of technology, assistive technology, it's interesting, at least from the blindness perspective, that those devices help me to be more centralized in what I'm working on, because there are different apps on iOS and Android that are a bit more affordable. It's obviously less to carry around since you have your phone, or your smart device, whatever it may be. But having the app on your phone, you have to aim at what you're trying to view. But the interesting thing about wearables is that it's kind of like having a tripod. It's just a very centralized things, which makes things more makes, at least in my opinion, makes a person a bit more efficient. There's less finagling that has to go on.
It takes the guesswork out of it. You no longer
Yeah.
have to sit
Mhm.
there and guess as to what you're focusing. You're looking, even if you can't see, you're looking at the sound, or you're looking in the direction you think something might be in, and the camera's just there following wherever your face is pointed.
Mhm.
Very cool. So I wanted to switch gears a bit and ask Sarah a few questions. You have a very interesting background. I'd love to know kind of a brief overview of how accessible tech has directly impacted your life. If you could kind of walk us through that.
Sure. Yeah, when I was in middle school, I went to a residential school for the deaf, and all the middle high school students were called in for a special assembly. And there was this new service they were talking about called the video relay service. And they had a video phone at that point, and someone could accept a call, and there would go through a remote interpreter, and you could actually call anyone in America. We could just make that call. And I was stunned, I can't really explain how I felt, the degree of independence I had. I didn't have to rely on family members or friends to make calls for me. So then much later, I was a little bit after that, I called my mom. I said, hey, can you pick me up? I missed the bus. You can come and pick me up. Just the last minute call to my mom. And it was a very strange experience for me to say, I love you to my parents through an interpreter. But prior to VRS, the video relay service, I'd have to ask the staff, hey, do you mind making a call for me? And then when VRS came out, it was a huge thing for the deaf and hard of hearing community. At first, the video phones had to be connected to a TV set. They were very clunky. They weren't portable. And we've gotten to where we are today, where you can make a call from anywhere virtually, using an iOS app, desktop app, an iPad, whatever, any device. And before before VRS, people would miss job opportunities. They couldn't call you back to let you know about a job. And you had to depend on friends and relatives to make the calls for you, which meant you didn't have privacy. And often there were problems with, working out the times, or banks actually wouldn't accept a third-party caller. There'd be an issue, and that would force me to go into a bank in person and struggle to communicate with them. And so there were a lot of difficulties. And they had the TTYs, the text-based systems, but they were hard to use. And a lot of hearing people would block you if you made a TTY call on the relay. They weren't sure how it worked. It seemed very strange. It was awkward, when somebody got a call from the TTY. So.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, just that aha moment from just one technology. I'd be interested to hear from you, Alex. Was there any sort of accessible tech like that kind of made things click, made all the difference for you?
That's a good question. I would agree with the video service or the video chat. Just because I don't get out very much. I do get out. Well, now I don't really get out at all, just because of the COVID-19 thing. But before that, I got out a bit, but not too much. So having that visual interaction over video service like FaceTime, Skype, Zoom now, or Google Meet definitely help just be able to communicate more with friends and family and be able to interact with them when I visit them in person. Was definitely helpful. In terms of in terms of accessible technology, I would have to say yes. Using like I have a wheelchair, which is more so assistive technology, but it's able to make me more accessible to get out. So I have a wheelchair. I use, um, headphones, just different things to help me do things a lot easier, and make it more accessible for me to work and do things independently. I guess would be my answer.
And Joshua, how about you? Did you ever have a moment similar to Sarah where a piece of tech came along that really changed things for you for the better?
For me, I think it was just it was more the integration of screen readers into mainstream devices like the iPhone. You can buy it right off the shelf, and there's already a screen reader on it. Same thing with different laptops. So just having screen readers that where I don't have to purchase a license for it, or go and download anything. It's right there in the device settings. I think that just really changed the game for me.
So quick pause for a second to anyone watching. Also, if you are interested in asking any of the panelists a question, feel free to pop it in the Q&A. And if we have time at the end, we'd be happy to go through them. So offer stands. Sarah, so I wanted to know how accessible tech for you has become more integrated into your life, more portable, more adaptable. What are some ways that that's happened for you?
Talking about the workplace, accessibility at home. Disabled people have their hobbies and their passions as well. It's not only work. I work at Intuit, but I also like to make movies with my brother Aaron and some other deaf filmmakers. So we make a lot of movies, and that really is our passion. And we have to deal with visual cues when we're doing film editing and audio editing. So there's different editing software where you see waveform shapes come up. They give you a visual and also the sound meter. And these waveforms will show if there's a sudden peak of sound, a sudden sound, for example, and we can pick that up, because we'll see the sudden spike. And so we'll know that something is, popped up in the audio background. And that'll let us know, the audio meter will let us know how loud that is. And so, that's a visual way we can see that. So audio editing is very time consuming for deaf people. And I'm not saying that, it takes a lot of time for hearing people too, but I think, for us, it's probably twice as hard. But in the, we make a lot, some people just get frustrated with the technology and, in terms of doing the editing. And some people use speech to text, for example, Microsoft Translate or Live Translate or something. We can use so we can hear what the actors, so we can see what the actors are saying. Like maybe, oh, that's the line that they shouldn't have said that line, then we can take it out or edit it out. So it's a big job for us to do that. But no, some people just decide they just don't want to do the audio editing. It's too much. So but if they don't do it, we lose the hearing audience. So the video technology actually has advanced a whole lot. iPads and phones, and could control movements of cameras, for example, or we could change lighting remotely through an app without having to touch them. So there are some real advances, but there are still barriers for people with disabilities.
One question I had for you. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
I just want to say, I watched Sarah's latest movie, and I responded to her. The sound quality in that movie was exceptional. And it wasn't exceptional for deaf filmmakers. It was an exceptional sound quality. I've seen a lot of independent films that have nowhere near the quality of sound that they had. Everything was clear. There was no distracting. Everybody was mic'd appropriately. There was nobody off mic or anything like that. So this technology has enabled them not just to make a film with sound, but to make a film with exceptional sound.
That's really cool. That's really interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's great. Maybe the CIL could do a little screening, a little film series once we open things back up. That'd be fantastic. Sarah, could you talk a little bit about the difference between live captioning and the more AI-based services that have come out lately? What are some pros and cons of each, and which do you prefer?
That's a wonderful question. I prefer live captioning with an actual person transcribing it because, you know, it can get a lot of the grammatical points and the punctuation, and they can include, you know, I know the phrasing, they can put in periods and the capital letters at the beginning of a sentence to help me kind of process what I'm reading. You know, AI captioning isn't able to do that. There's no punctuation. Sometimes I struggle to figure out how to parse, you know, what's the beginning of the sentence? What's the end of the sentence? You know, and is that a question, or are they being sarcastic? Or I do have to say that the captions have really improved a whole lot, you know, over the years. I remember the day when, you know, the automatic captioning was, oh my God, it was terrible. You know, you just couldn't use it. It was totally unusable. But today, actually, it is pretty accurate, and, you know, maybe things will get better in the future. So, you know, but still the live captioning is much better.
Alex, I know you use some of that tech as well, so I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, so I have used and seen live captioning and AI captioning. For me, I prefer, like Sarah was saying, live captioning just because I have some speech problems or speech impediment. I mean, unable to pronounce some of my letters. So with the AI system, or even just using Siri or those kinds of AI communication things, it's hard for them to understand what I'm saying sometimes. So having that live captioner, because they can pretty much understand more so than a robot per se, they'll be able to caption what I'm saying more clearly than an AI can, just because they may get something wrong, which will throw off the whole context of the sentence, I think.
If I can add something to that, most of our AI-driven captioning, text-to-speech, speech-to-text has been based on the voices of white men, because that's where they got their data from. And it's really important that we get a diverse speech examples and to put into the data sets so that we can build these AI-driven speech-to-text that can understand a speech impediment. Mozilla has a project where they're asking people to go in and submit their voice samples so that they can help build this diverse voice set. And I know there's about 2 or 3 other organizations out there trying to build cleaner, more diverse voice samples for people that speak English as a second language, people with speech impediments, people with heavy dialects, things like that.
It's really interesting. Yeah, that's something I never even considered. So that's really interesting. Ted and Sarah, you can also chime in here as well. I'd love to know a little bit more about the work Intuit has done with entrepreneurs with disabilities, with an eye towards employment and entrepreneurship. Could you speak a little more on that?
I can start and then pass to Sarah. um, we at Intuit, our mission is to power prosperity around the globe. And unfortunately, in the disability community, unemployment and underemployment is extremely high. And what a lot of people do when they can't get the job that they deserve is they start their own business. So self-employment and entrepreneurship is a large part of independence within the disability community. So as the accessibility team, we've been trying to work with different organizations that help with entrepreneurship. With IRA, which is a sighted assistance program, we provide free IRA usage for blind and low vision entrepreneurs. So if you need to, let's say, sign a contract, you can use IRA to help you sign that contract. They do not need to be our customers. So it's independent of our customers. We also sponsor the Sagebrush Conference for Randolph Shepherd vendors, and we sponsor the Yantern Summit for deaf entrepreneurs. I hired Sarah as an intern. It's been about 3 years ago, specifically to research the barriers and opportunities for deaf entrepreneurs and accountants. And so Sarah can tell you a lot more about that.
Sure. Are we switching interpreters? Okay. Okay.
My research on deaf and hard of hearing. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Okay, they were, a lot of them were blocked in their work environment, and there were barriers for them. And I think the biggest barrier was communication, and also that's also LIT.
Literacy.
Literacy was a big issue for them. And so we learned that the majority of the deaf and hard of hearing people didn't have the appropriate reading level to access some business information, and it really, it would be difficult to read a contract that would be not be accessible for them, or to deal with an accountant, for example. So we were working on how to make sure that the language was simplified to make it more readable. So for anyone, actually, it would help anyone to read that sort of contractual language. So we worked with a lot of customers and connected with the teams, and asked clients and customers if they were open to, really this would make these things open to anyone. And we wanted to learn about their experiences and how that would work with their products, and what barriers they were seeing for their products and what could be improved. So that's what we did.
One thing that we learned from interviewing Mozeria, the pizza restaurant in San Francisco, is that video relay service is difficult when a small business owner wants to talk to an accountant, because they're trying to talk about business terminology, but they're having to go through a third person. And what's really important is that a deaf entrepreneur can talk to a deaf accountant. So we went back to we have what's called a Pro Advisor. These are accountants that have been certified for Intuit products, so they know how our products work. We went back to that team and we asked them to include a new part of their profile. And that new part of the profile is language. So now a deaf entrepreneur can find a Pro Advisor that communicates with American Sign Language, actually sign language, because it works in other countries. But because of this, you can also find, let's say, an accountant that speaks Chinese or French or Portuguese. You may not necessarily care that they're a block away from you. You'd rather find an accountant that can communicate effectively with you.
That's really interesting. Absolutely, really, really good work that you guys are doing. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Ted, I understand that you're a chair of something called Web for All, sort of internationally focused on accessibility issues. Can you talk a little bit about your work there and some of your priorities for this upcoming year that you think that group will be working on?
Web for All is a conference of accessibility research. It's associated with a larger conference called the Web Conference. So what Web for All does is it allows students from around the world that are doing research or getting their PhDs to share their information, their research with other colleagues around the world. We've seen some really great work that starts in one year and then over the years starts progressing, building up momentum by pulling in people from other countries. Two really good examples were there was a team out of Europe trying to figure out how can you detect dyslexia in pre-literate children. So using mobile phone games, using things like memory games, being able to associate what are the tiles, they actually were able to create a game that kids enjoyed playing, but could detect whether or not they had dyslexia before they were able to read a book. Another example was a team who were trying to figure out if there was anything with web design that kept people with autism from being able to quickly parse through a page and find something. And they did find some patterns that were interesting. So they took that data and they thought, can we flip it? And so what they wanted to see was if they can use the eye tracking, can they actually detect that someone has autism by the way that they look at a website? And so they then took their data and were able to come up with an algorithm that had about an 80% success rate. And so then they were able to evolve that over the years and come up with a tool. Now, in some communities, being diagnosed with autism is a complex process, but in some communities they don't have that kind of support. So to be able to diagnose autism in a 3 or 4-year-old, 5 or 6-year-old, without all that expense can really change the way that they develop throughout their lives. And that can be done just with a web application.
So I think, go ahead.
I was going to say this year, the conference normally moves around the world. This year was supposed to be in Slovenia, but it'll be a virtual conference. And if I remember correctly, it's in April.
Very nice.
I should know that off the top of my head.
So I think we're getting close to our end time here. So I think I'll put this question to everyone. I think that there are some people that might say, I'm sure you work with businesses, Ted, that might say, it's tough to make my stuff accessible. It's expensive. It could be cumbersome to do. Why does accessibility matter? Just in an overarching sense, what would you say to that?
I'll give you a really concrete example. Right now we're using Zoom. Zoom listened to people with disabilities for the past 2 years. They perfected being able to display the computer sound as well as the microphone sound so that people with screen readers could use meetings. They were prepared for things like automatic transcriptions. The Zoom interface is keyboard accessible. This is a company that built an accessible product. They had no idea that this accessible product was going to allow them to scale exponentially when COVID hit. Before COVID, at Intuit, we were a Blue Jeans company. And Blue Jeans didn't work very well without a mouse. It worked at one point, then they did a redesign and things like that. But then you saw companies like Microsoft and Google changing their meeting platforms to reach Zoom's level. So the lesson is that if you build a product that's accessible from the very beginning and you listen to your customers, you're going to build a better product. And that product is going to have longer legs and it's going to work for greater audiences.
Sir, I think I'll put the same question to you. Why does accessibility matter?
Who was that to? Sarah?
Oh, Sarah, yes, Sarah.
Okay. Really, that's it's become part of my life. Without accessibility, people with disabilities don't have their own independence. And that's why it's really important to me that I also maintain my own independence in my life.
And Joshua and Alex, I think to wrap things up here, I mean, you're both doing a lot of good work with consumers at the CIL and helping them to find accessible resources and other resources. Could you talk a little more about the work you do? Joshua, we could start with you.
Yeah. Again, as the assistive technology specialist, I help people try to navigate the field of assistive technology. It's great that we have so many different options, that can address the needs of various people. So it's my job to help people try to navigate that big, that big field, whether it's relating to mobility, vision, hearing, communication, all different types of needs. So we try to figure out what devices would be best for them, and how we can get that transitioned into their daily lifestyle. And yeah, that's a bulk of the things I'm doing. It's a lot of great work, constantly learning. Yeah, and learning from consumers as well as they come in.
And likewise, I've been learning from consumers, but as well as what I've been doing, especially during this COVID-19 time, is helping people or supporting people in learning how to use their device or how to get on Zoom, so that way they're able to communicate with their loved ones or talk with their loved ones or their friends and family and things like that. Because some people just don't, because it's new in some ways to some people, and they don't know how to use it. They're able to contact me and learn how to get on Zoom or how to get on Google Meet, whatever platform that they need to use. I'm able to help them do that.
So that's great, guys. If
Yeah,
anyone has any, yeah,
There's
Ted.
a question online.
Let's see.
And I just want to answer one of the parts of the question was, how can someone help companies like Intuit improve their accessibility? We'd love to hear from our customers. So one of the things, I've got my URL, intuit.com/accessibility. But what really helps us is details. If you're having a problem, instead of sending a note saying that QuickBooks is inaccessible, it's really nice to know that you were working in the invoice page and you were not able to add a product to the invoice. So if people can, please give your feedback to companies, but also any kind of details you can apply to that feedback. It means the difference between it actually being fixed or not.
All right. Well, if anyone else has any questions watching out there today, speak now or forever hold your peace. I don't know if any of our panelists here have any parting messages they'd like to leave us with. Give you a few minutes to do that if anyone's interested. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. This has been really interesting, everyone. Thank you to all of our panelists, our ASL interpreters, for coming today. This has been a blast. Thank you all.